Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this episode of the Adopt 365 podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Barry Coombs, and in this podcast today, we want to talk about how to drive successful adoption of Microsoft 365. Over the last 12 months, we have seen organizations turn to the tools within Microsoft 365 to enable remote and flexible working. Satya Nadella said we've been part of the world's largest remote working, flexible working trial over the last 12 months. And to many of us, it probably feels like that. But with increased usage and the introduction of constant new features within inside Microsoft 365, we face a challenge as to how we can drive adoption within inside our businesses, but making sure that we've got clarity and a common understanding as to how these tools are used within the departments and within your organization. So on today's podcast, we will be focusing on our 6 top tips to successfully drive adoption within Microsoft 365 in your business. But before we get started on that, let me introduce you to my co-hosts, and we will talk about our top features that are coming out in Microsoft 365 or have recently appeared within the roadmap. So I'd like to introduce to the podcast Anthony.
Morning.
And Megan. Thank you very much both for joining me.
Thank you.
So we kind of start this podcast every month or every episode with a reflection on some new features. Maybe it's something we've spent some time looking at, or maybe it's just something we've seen appearing on the roadmap that is something we really can't wait for it to get released. So Megan, over to you first. What's standing out to you at the moment?
So my feature that I am excited about this episode is the ability to give live reactions in meetings in Teams. I think it only came out on or earlier this week. So we're on the 18th of February now. So earlier this week it came out. And actually it's something so simple, but I think it has a lot of effect on and a lot of impact on the people who are presenting, for people to be able to send a little heart, send a laughing reaction whilst they're presenting. Because if there are times that you're presenting to people and not getting a lot of feedback, if their camera's not on and you can't see their reactions, it can feel quite daunting that you're presenting to nobody. So just getting those little reactions on your screen can be really useful. And we've actually got our company kickoff day at Computer World next week, and this is something that me and my colleague Jen were talking about, that we'd really like something like that. Didn't think it'd be possible. So the fact that they've now released it for early access in time for our event is really good. So we'll be using those at our kickoff day as well. So I'm excited for that.
I think it's really difficult as a presenter, isn't it? Because normally when you're in a room full of people, you're looking for people's reactions. Those micro reactions. It might be someone just nodding their head, or someone smiling at something that you're saying, or something like that. And if you are doing a very faceless Teams meeting that is more of a presentation, so you can't see everyone's faces nice and easily, I think it's now nice that you have that way of kind of giving that kind of on the periphery reaction to something that's going on.
Definitely. Yeah, and something that I definitely want to try and use a lot more and get people to use when we're presenting to people as well. So I'm excited for that.
Definitely. And I think as much as we're going to be talking about, that will be part of the culture inside your company, that if people say that this is going to be useful, this could be useful to my presentation, it probably will just be prompting people to use that feature, because otherwise you might kind of think, oh, is that going to distract them? Is this professional, putting emojis up as we're going? So it's part of that culture. You want to encourage that type of interaction.
Yeah.
So for me, one of the biggest features that I've heard talking about, and there was an announcement with Satya Nadella and some of the others at Microsoft earlier this month, was all around Microsoft Viva. So this is a coming together of tools that Microsoft classify as employee experience tools. So there's 4 different sections initially. You've got topics, which is related to Project Cortex that you might have heard of before. This is the ability for AI to help find categories, topics within the content that is stored within your SharePoint sites, to almost create a Wikipedia of your business, meaning that if people are seeing a topic name in an article they're reading or in other places such as Teams, they will be able to click it and go and get to a point of clarity as to what that topic is all about for your business. We then have learning, centralizing all of your learning resources from a multitude of different areas straight inside Teams. Insights, which is very much connected with my analytics and workspace analytics, all about well-being and how the team are communicating and being effective. And then we have connections, which is all about bringing your SharePoint home site in directly into Teams. So we've heard about that before. So this is a really exciting topic for me, and so much so we're going to do a special podcast with Matuza from Poly, talking all around Viva, but also talking about employee experiences and culture inside an organization. So watch out for that one. We'll be recording that one shortly. And secondly, just to come in there, because I've been looking at another technology quite a lot. So as anyone will know, I'm a big fan of Microsoft Lists and the benefits that can deliver to organizations quite simply and quite effectively. They've now introduced list rules, which is the ability to quickly create effective notifications for when certain things happen within a list directly inside Microsoft Lists itself. So no longer do you need to go out and use Power Automate to go and automate those notifications. You can do it directly inside Lists. So those are my top two features. Anthony, what are the things that you've seen recently?
So I've been thinking more around some of the hardware elements, and I think first impressions are important. It's a long time since I went to a client and met with them physically, but one of the things you used to do before you went through the door is kind of check you're looking all right and check your shoes have not too scuffed up. And it's the same with video, and it's the same with Teams meetings. And therefore, things like poor sound quality and poor picture quality do have an impact on what people are thinking about the quality of your organization when you're interacting with them. So I've looked at Poly, who have released recently a new range of hardware called the Studio P range, which is really equipment to enable you to improve the quality of your video and audio in a simple way. I think many of you will be sat looking at your screens at the moment with kind of lots of devices all over the place. What Poly have done is enable us to bring those things together. So the first thing that they've done is the Polystudio P5 Camera, which is a really good quality camera. Often if we're just doing a meeting on a laptop, then the camera quality significantly lets us down. So putting a good camera on the top of your laptop or on your home PC really does improve the quality of the meeting. The camera, it's got a 1080p resolution, but it's also got a really good sized aperture, so you're getting plenty of light in there and getting some really good quality images. It's got a focus directional microphone built in there so that you can really get good quality sound. It's actually got a USB slot as well, so you can link your headphones directly to it via a dongle, just to try and reduce the number of cables you've got lying around your desk. And it just really pimps the quality of your sound and your video. So it's a really good little unit and a really compact little unit. The second device I've been looking at has been the Studio P15. Which is a video soundbar. So like a soundbar you'd have under your TV, just can be mounted on the top of a monitor, and that has a 4K camera and a multiple microphone array. So it's very good at searching out the sound and working to suppress background sounds. So that's a really good quality and a really good compact way to upgrade the quality of your sound and your video. The third device is a new one. Really, it's a new format. It's a 21-inch monitor with the video built in to it, and also a very good microphone setup built into that, and stereo speakers. It also has lighting as well. So it's got a light bar around the edge of the screen that provides some really good lighting to give a really good quality image. And that would work really well just sat alongside a laptop as a second monitor as well. It's a 21-inch monitor, and that's the Studio P21. They've also introduced an application to manage all those platforms, which is the PolyLens management platform that can allow you to keep those devices up to date across your organization. Barry, you've been doing a lot with devices at the moment. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think as time is going by, and we've got this greater need to communicate via video, but also you communicate in different ways. So it might not just be in a Teams meeting, it might be recording videos for the form of training. Megan, I know you're creating a lot of training content for 365 at the moment. So I think it's that kind of piece that this is now an accepted way to work. It's an accepted way to communicate, and you need to. Back in the day when you were going out and visiting customers, you made sure you had your shoes shined and your suit on or whatever. You wanted to create that good impression. Now we're kind of connecting to people from our own homes, or it's more accepted for doing that remotely. So we need to kind of make sure they get the best experience possible. So I'm really excited to see that. And some of the most interesting features for this, for me, are the little things that maybe you don't take into consideration. So on all of these devices, there is a USB port on the back of it. So even the P5 camera, there's a small USB port on the back of it that you can plug your Poly Bluetooth dongle in the back of the camera. So with devices getting less and less USB ports, you've then got that directly on there to be able to plug in with that. And then the other thing is with the P5, they've got bundles. So you'll be able to buy a bundle that's all packaged up, ready for IT to send out ready for IT to send out to users with a camera, with a headset, or with a camera and with a speakerphone, all in it, all bundled up, ready to go. Use the PolyLens cloud for IT to manage it centrally, and use PolyLens from a user perspective for you to be able to go and do that. So yeah, really cool technology, and yeah, excited to see them come out in April. So I think we're onto the part of the podcast now where we're onto the main subject. So our top 6 tips for driving adoption of Microsoft 365. I think the challenge with this is many people will approach these projects like they are a technical project, like they may have done with previous iterations of rolling out Microsoft technologies inside of their business. But this project is much more than that. It affects the users much more, and it has such a massive impact on an organization. And we've seen the rate of change that has happened be accelerated to what was predicted to be 5 years or more to get to the point where we are today, to happen in just a 12-month period. So to get started on our first point, Anthony, over to you.
Yeah, I think that you've set me up well there, Barry, because the first point really is to realize that a Teams project is a business project and not a technology project. If your IT manager comes to you and says, look, we need to do this technology, your question is always why. It's all about why you're going to do that. And therefore, it's also important for IT managers to realize that as well. Businesses are made up, generally of the same components. They're made up of your product, your locations, your clients, your employees, and really what makes a difference is how effectively you communicate and collaborate within the organization. And that's exactly where Microsoft Teams hits. It is a set of tools to enable you to communicate and collaborate really effectively, and more effectively than you do at the moment. So it's important when you start out off on a project that you spend some time to understand your organization. You also spend some time to understand the technology. And then the third and probably the most important thing is you start to understand the people within your organization, because the thing that's going to hold us back the most is going to be the people. Doing the technology bit is usually quite easy. It's actually getting that technology across to into the hands of the users and training them well to be able to use it is really important. So you need to sit down with your management team at the beginning of the project when you've got your head around the organization, around the technology, and start to build with them a vision for what you're trying to achieve, and set in that vision some success criteria that you want to move towards, so that when you've got when you progress with the project, and it is really important that you do that with the management team to get their buy-in is really, really important to help drive that through. And one of the key things that you'll realize when you introduce Teams into an organization is it significantly increases the number of ways in which you can communicate and collaborate within your organization. Generally, until recently, organizations have been very email centric. When we start to put together a team solution in, we're introducing other channels like posting things on intranet, maybe using one-to-one chat and one-to-many chat, and therefore it's important as a kind of fundamental element of the project that you start to think about what is how do we use those channels in our business is in a uniform way, and that's where we start to develop work with people to develop a communications charter. It's only then, when we've got those bits and pieces in place and we've delivered some fundamental kind of operational training, that we should start to dig into different departments and look at their use cases and look at how we can develop the technology and use the tools within Microsoft Teams to be able to deliver enhancement in the way in which they're communicating and collaborating.
I think it's really important that when you're doing these things, it is that clarity that at the initial stage is, what are we setting out to achieve with the projects? What are the limitations? What are the boundaries? What are the ways that we want to communicate? What are the challenges we're trying to overcome?
I think that's important. Yeah, and it's important to look at those in detail. Yeah,
definitely. Right, on to point 2 then, Megan.
So obviously, as Anthony just said, we need to get people bought into this project, and some of the key people we really need to get bought into this are the leaders of the business. The IT team need to work with those leaders of the business that really have the ability to change people's mindsets, change the ways that the departments work in order to drive this technology change. So bringing them in from the first instance, doing a session with them to show them what could be possible with all these technologies within Microsoft Teams and all the other technologies within the Office 365 suite is really important, because from the start of this project, they can start understanding how it's going to change the way they work, how it's going to change the way their teams work, and they can get bought into the project. They're then involved at every stage of this project, and they can drive that adoption with us. But the other important part of this isn't just having that key leadership team involved, it's having the next group of people that are going to drive that with the leadership team as well. And we refer to those as the Office 365 champions. So you've got this group of people that don't necessarily have to be managers, not leaders of the business. They are just people in the business that adopt technology, like to change, and have some sort of ability to get people on board and help them and show them how it works as well. So we call them the champions, and they are key throughout each stage of the project, the training stages, making sure that they're up to speed with all the latest technologies and features of the technologies, and bringing them on board to help drive that from a people perspective rather than a technology or leader perspective as well.
Definitely. And when we record this podcast, we ask people from our community of champions to come and join us before to talk about the subjects we're going to be talking about during the podcast. And certainly, if you're interested in joining us for that kind of pre-discussion, then please get in touch with any of us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or email. But prior to that, Mark in the champions community was talking about the need to empower the champions, give them a purpose, a reason that they're part of the program. You've got to kind of continually work with them and understand, get their feedback, tell them how they can be helping from that perspective. And I think, Megan, that's a really important point, isn't it? It's making sure this isn't kind of a one-time get-together of people for a meeting. It is coming together into a team that can help with the rollout and help people that are using this technology.
Definitely, and with how fast everything is changing within Microsoft at the moment, for somebody who is doing the champions bit as a sort of, I don't want to say side hustle, but as a side role within their business to help adopt that technology, it's not something that they're going to be able to keep up to date with all that often with the rate of change. So having those regular catch-ups with your champions to say, hey, this is what's been released in the last 2-3 months with Teams. Now, if anybody asks them about it, they've had that training, they've had that catch up with the IT team or whoever's driving this to see those updates and what's coming on the roadmap as well, so that they know what's coming. And definitely having those regular catch ups to check in with them and understand how the people they're working with are feeding back to them. Because if we're seeing a real issue within the users that are bringing that to the champions, it's how we can then fix that and work with those champions to drive positive change within that project.
Definitely. And Anthony, I think this kind of comes in very well with the points that you were making around that clarity and things like that. So you're able to bring those people together that if you're working just with IT, to try and understand how the technology is going to be used. It can be very much kind of, okay, we want to be able to send instant messages, so we're going to use Teams. Yeah. But that is then just another tool being added into that mix, isn't it? It is just then another avenue that could cause further disruption, and hopefully bringing together both the leaders and the champions does allow that clarity to be delivered.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's important that feedback loop, as Mark was saying in the meeting, the community meeting before this. Getting that feedback is really, really important, and acting on that feedback. So where people aren't happy with a process, we can review that. I'm thinking about where the areas where we put technology in place within computer world, and it worked in a different way to what we expected. And one of the things I often share is that our engineers who will work out generally on customer sites are very good at solving problems. But there's a real danger that one of them will solve a problem one day, and the next day another engineer will solve exactly the same problem. So they have a real culture now of sharing solutions they found to problems, and where they use the Teams community platform to do that. And that's a real kind of learning tool, and that's a really good way to get feedback. And I'm sure there are other examples from other clients of ours where they're starting to use that technology and that feedback mechanism in the same way.
Definitely. So I think that pulls on nicely to my point. So tip number 3 is make sure you're working with the teams to understand actually how they communicate, how they collaborate, how they currently track processes through their department, how they track who's doing what task, understand what challenges they're facing doing that, and understand where they believe there are maybe opportunities for technology to help them in some other way. This, for me, is one of the most interesting elements of the department of the project. We're kind of in the first phases when we're rolling it out. We're kind of doing what we call the brilliant basics. We're helping people use the basic functionality around chat, around meetings, around those basic collaboration features in Teams. But when you start then getting into the departments, it's all around how that department can work. And it isn't always about the boundary of a physical department, the people you work with. It's where you come together for projects, where you come together for different elements is really important to be considered. So make sure that at the appropriate point, you're sitting down with the relevant people in your department. You may have already involved some champions in the earlier stages. Bring them in, bring the departmental leaders in. Where possible, get a large subset of the department to come in and talk about what you want to achieve with the project, what the organization wants to be able to achieve, and see how that then relates to them. Are they going to use Teams to communicate as a department? Is actually one of the challenges they really want to overcome is trying to figure out on where every stage of a project is as they go through it. And once you understand that, kind of concentrate on those easy wins, concentrate on getting the Teams rollout, concentrate on making sure that the manager knows that they've got this platform now to communicate on, and that everyone knows how to take part in there. Megan, at this stage, you typically will be looking at how to do collaboration on documents and things like that as well, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. So it's all those key tips that are going to help you communicate and collaborate, but obviously just starting at those basics. We don't want people to run before they can walk, and it can get a little bit out of hand if you do that. But I probably say this about every feature in Teams, but collaborating on files is one of my favorites, because when you do speak to people around how they currently collaborate, you always get the same answers. You either email it out to everybody and someone has to make all the changes, or you get locked out of a document and you have to ask who has got that document open, which isn't as easy when you can't shout across the office at Jenny in the corner if she's still in the document and needs it, and you're having to wait for her on chat or whatever. It's a lot easier now that you can come into Teams and co-author those documents, and also have that communication against a document using the conversation buttons within Teams as well. So yeah, that is something we cover now.
Yeah, definitely. And so within these departmental sections, typically you will find systems that the departments are already utilizing. So it's an opportunity to look for points of integration. It's also a point to be able to look for points of conflict. So quite often there is another business system that might be in place that there's a real important reason within inside the organization that that business system must be used. And whilst Teams or Microsoft 365 could deliver some of that functionality, it's important to make sure that you're talking about why it is important to continue using that business system, and maybe look at for points of integration. So are there bots available? Are there plugins available? Are there apps available that allow those systems to integrate within Teams? Worst case scenario, could you just make that application available as a tab within the team? So at least when someone joins the department, they're able to find all the applications they need to be able to use quickly and easily. But it would also enable the conversations feature against that tab. So if there's a specific update that you need someone to do on that system, or someone's having a problem with that system, they could very quickly go, at team, what do I do with this? I'm really struggling with what's going on. Is everyone seeing that this screen looks black at the moment? It should be white. Whatever those examples are on those applications, you can do. But it was really interesting talking in the champions community before the podcast. One of the things that Mark was pointing out was generally for those departments is about the little wins. And it might be those things that we're kind of looking into from the outside in, people that have used these advanced features inside Microsoft 365 for some time. We go, well, that's just really simple. Like the example that Megan gave there, the ability to comment or co-collaborate on a document, or the ability to be able to track something in a list or in Planner. Those features, we might assume they're really simple. Why aren't people just using those kind of things? But actually getting in that conversation, understanding the pain point that those people have, and understanding the benefit that just something that simple could deliver to their department, their productivity, their communication, their collaboration, can be absolutely massive. And certainly I think some of the applications we've seen some really interesting use cases on that kind of go beyond expectations are lists, OneNote, forms, and booking at a departmental level. They're really quite interesting. I don't know if either of you guys have got any kind of thoughts about these kind of quick wins at a department level.
I'm always really excited I'm always really excited to find those things, and that's kind of one of the reasons I'm so passionate about Microsoft Teams is that when you actually take the technology and you take the toolkit into a department, you can, just find things that are so simple from a technical point of view that makes such a difference from a business point of view. Earlier on I was saying that, most businesses are the same. They're just a set of components that need to communicate and collaborate more effectively. And when you actually spot those workflows and think, hang on a minute, I can apply this technology and make that work a lot quicker and save this organization significant amounts of time and therefore money, then that's, I get really excited about those kind of things. And it is about spending time with the departments, having good background knowledge of the technology, but then spending time with those departments and looking at what they do and not assuming that you have to find something complicated to get some real payback. Megan?
I was just going to add as well, there's applications, like you mentioned, Barry, bookings. There's applications that I've known have been there for a while, and I've never really dug into it that much because it's not something that I saw. Not that I didn't see much benefit, but I didn't have that use case where we could use it. But recently we've been working with a customer who wanted to get customers of theirs to book in with them so that they could do virtual meetings with them, and actually just seeing how quick it was to set that up as a quick solution for them in a couple of days, and now they're taking that and it's becoming really successful, and you're actually able to drive some sort of profit towards that as well. So as a business, they can see just a small change within that actually has driven some profit for their organization and has helped them. That was a really key win for me as well recently.
Definitely, that's really good. And probably a nice segue now onto a subject, Megan, that is very close to your heart as a Office 365 coach or a Microsoft 365 coach. Megan, do you want to talk about your point, tip number 4, engaging training?
I love this bit. I'll talk for hours. I won't really, but so training is, for me, a really key part, and for all of us is a really key part of this project. As much as we're saying this is a business change, it's not just a technology project. You could just do it as a business change, give people the technology and then not do any training and expect them to learn how to use it. I think some people would adopt that. They would understand what they can do with the technology. But the problem at that point is nobody's doing it in the same way. You've then got half the workforce who maybe have adopted it slightly, half the workforce who haven't, and there's no standard way that everybody is working, and then it can just become really difficult. So delivering training as a starting point to show everybody that this is how it could be used and this is how we recommend you use it, alongside that communications charter that we've created, so everybody's communicating in it the same way, is really key to just get the ball rolling with the adoption. But once you've done those sessions, and we usually do those as webinar sessions, obviously at the moment we can't do them in person, so we're doing them as webinar sessions where we just touch on a specific subject. So today we're going to talk about communications within teams. Next week we talk about collaboration, and then we go on to a little bit more advanced use cases with things like planner, task management within teams, taking notes as a team with OneNote, etc. But once you have delivered those sessions, it's then not expecting everybody to just pick it up and use it there and then, because realistically, most people aren't going to be able to do that. We've done an hour session with them and they're not going to be able to remember everything. So it's then giving them bite-sized training that they can utilize as and when they actually need it. So whether that's in short videos, so bite-sized videos that are just 60 seconds long that says, how do I pin a chat in Teams? They can then watch that specific video and get that information quickly when they need it. Or if it's in a written format, because not everybody likes watching videos, some people take it in different ways. So it's giving them that first training to give them the standard. This is how you can use it. This is what you can do. And then after that training, giving them different types of training, whether that's videos, written, as I said, that they can then consume at their own pace when they need it, because they're never going to remember anything. So yeah, it is a subject that I find really interesting, and just allowing them to have all that makes the adoption a lot better, because they can adopt it at their own pace.
Yeah, I think there's the really important point that Megan made there is that, don't assume that they know how to use it. A lot of people won't have fired up the Teams client on their device before lockdown. They won't have had any kind of training session, so they've learnt it themselves. And I still come across people who say, look, the problem with Teams is I keep getting loads of notifications. And you say, well, do you know how to turn them off? And they say, oh, can I turn them off? And it's those simple things that if you can, we need to kind of level people's understanding of how to use it up to a point where it's, they can make good use of the tool set. Other people, people don't realize you can access it from a browser and from a mobile phone as well. And just going through those simple training to show them how to use the different clients and just understand a little bit of that, about the limitations of some of the mobile clients, is just really, really useful and will bring you significant benefits and help people to communicate more effectively using Teams.
Definitely. And I think there probably will be a couple people that maybe if they've moved to your business during lockdown or anything like that, they may have used Teams in a previous role that they've been part of. But actually, whilst they know how they would use it in that past role, is that the way that you're encouraging them to use it in your organization? So giving people the training when they join your business, if that's the case, or if they missed the original training when you did webinar sessions, giving them the training so that when they join the business, they're up to speed quickly. They know how your organization is using it, so that they can come in and not disrupt. They can just come in and continue with that adoption and continue collaborating in the way that they should be.
Definitely. And I think some really important points there are the point that not everybody likes to learn using the same styles or the same methods. And an element that you mentioned there, Megan, was then the delivery of that training in multiple different ways: written guides, bite-sized videos, live training. It's important to make sure people are having the ability to learn in a number of styles, but then they also have the ability to be able to catch up, go and find something, go and dig into a subject when it matters to them. I think that was a really important point that you made there. And from the champions community earlier, we heard about the importance of the need for training to be ongoing. Microsoft are constantly developing this platform. This isn't like Office of old, where you were waiting 2 or 3 years for the next version of Office to be released, to be pushed out by IT. This is getting updated quickly and regularly, directly for the users. So it's how do we keep people up to date with that? How can we let people know of new features in such a way that they can kind of quickly have a glance, dig into the things that matter to them, or be able to choose the training that is appropriate to them at the right time? So I think this is a real challenge for organizations. It's a very new thing you've got to do. It's not like the piece of business software that you've once deployed, sent everyone on a training course for a couple of days, and they know how to use it for the next 5 years. Ultimately, they're going to have to continually learn in a way that doesn't detract them from their job and allows them to be productive with the software. So, Anthony, on to point 5 of our tips and tricks then. Review, reflect, and resolve.
Yeah, I think this is a really important one. I talked earlier about the importance of having a plan and involving the senior management and putting a vision together and putting together, the steps and some criteria to make sure you know where you are in that plan. But unfortunately, a Microsoft Teams adoption project is not fire and forget. We can't draw up a Gantt chart at the beginning of the project and then follow that timeline along throughout the whole of the project, and at the end of it we successfully delivered it. We need to get constant feedback. One of the main reasons is that there are people involved in the process. It's not like an email migration where we're doing it on the background. There are people involved, and it's the speed of the people that we need to ensure we're taking them with them and not taking them with us and not leaving them behind. So feedback is so important at every stage in the project. And the secret is to take small steps and then seek feedback. We can do that through feedback from champions. As Megan talked, it's important to have champions at a departmental level who can give us feedback on how the success of how things are going at that level. But also from senior management. I know it's really difficult at the moment to walk into a department within your organization and get a real feel for how they're adopting the technology because we're all working from home. But you need to try and create ways to do that. Using Microsoft Forms as a feedback mechanism is a really good way to do that. But as I said, the secret with these projects is to take small steps and then get that feedback and then adjust the project based on that feedback. And that's just a constant thing. The most common reason for projects being failing this nature is trying to be too ambitious. The second, I would think, most common reason for failing is just moving the project too fast for the people to keep up. So it's really important through that whole process to get feedback, be agile and flexible enough for your project. To enable to adjust that, feed a bit more training if you need, educate, create some more champions groups and things of that nature as you go along, just to make sure that you're getting the real benefits and you're not rushing what you're trying to do.
Definitely, and I think that there was a point made in our champions community call before this, was sometimes when you're rolling something out, you think it's going to be taken off in one way, it's going to be adopted in one way, it's going to be used in one way inside the organization. But having that opportunity to reflect allows you to kind of reassess, okay, so this is where we are, this is what we thought was going to happen. It doesn't feel quite right at the moment. It doesn't seem to have taken off in the way that we wanted it to. So what do we need to do to change that? How can we make it a more of an attractive proposition? How can we encourage people to use it? And one of the examples that we used was Yammer. There was a desire that Yammer was going to be utilized as a real community coming together for the whole organization. But it wasn't taken up. And actually, that was probably in the example that was mentioned, maybe because there was just too much change happening at once. And people hadn't had the opportunity to really kind of embrace Yammer and understand what worked for them. But one of the things that they started to look at was the ability to be able to integrate Yammer into Teams. So put the Teams community directly next to the people, using it for Q&As in certain scenarios and things like that. So just that point to be able to kind of just pause, review, reflect, and resolve allows you to look at something in a slightly different way. And Megan, you've probably seen the same things when you've delivered training, that the desire was after the training, everyone knew what they were going to do, but then you've had to then do some remedial action of some kind.
Yeah, we have seen that. But I think what is key is when we said with that training and when Anthony said making sure that you're not trying to do everything too fast, it's starting with that basic training. So just start with that communication and collaboration training before you introduce all the other applications into it, because at that point you've then got about 5 different tabs within each of your 6 channels within the 7 teams you're part of, and at that point it becomes too overwhelming. Just starting with those basics so that everyone understands the value that brings before then bringing in those advanced features will really help with that. But we have seen some cases where we've had to go back and do maybe a bit more training because, like you say, it didn't wasn't adopted in the way that we expected it to, so we've had to do more training to either change the way we've trained people to suit how it is actually being used, or to train them again to help them understand how it could be used in a different way.
Definitely. So I think we're down to our 6th point, and this is, we've been very much focusing on the users, on the business, on the adoption, on getting it out there. And we started off at the beginning by focusing on kind of, look, this is a business change project, not just a technology project. Now, point 6 is engage with IT. And that obviously depends on who's listening to this podcast. You might be IT yourself and hearing, actually, you need to reach out to the users, your champions, your senior leadership, and bring this together. But technology is an important part of this project. And almost it can be too simple to implement these technologies in a way that users could use very quickly or very easily. And what I would just like to urge at the 6th point is the importance of coming back, looking at the technology, looking at how it's been configured, considering your security posture, considering your data protection posture, considering compliance inside your organization, things that you might need to be aligned to. It's really important that you're considering all those things. And Microsoft does some elements to help us. So you've got Secure Score and the compliance scores that are available that you can go and review to understand where your security and compliance posture currently sit. You could go and look at your licensing. Actually, what are you licensed for? What is your future vision? How does the change with all of this kind of collaboration and communication technology sit alongside other projects you might be looking at inside your business, such as a replacement telephone system, or how you manage devices when they're out there on the road? Anthony, I know you've been looking at technologies recently like AIP and how organizations might adopt them. And there's challenges with those technology that are both technical and from a user perspective, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, one of the elements we haven't talked about is really the data element, this kind of storage strategy that you need to think through when you're adopting teams, how you start to move your data into the cloud and make it readily available so that you can work with teams, and the security aspects of that. So AIP, Advanced Azure Information Protection, plays a key role in that, but it does take a lot of planning and a lot of thought through your kind of information architecture in the business. So yeah, it's incredible technology, but you need to do the planning to get that bit of it right. But there are some very quick wins in there as well, which we can help to improve the way in which your data is secured in a very, very short time.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Megan and Anthony, for joining me on today's podcast, but also to our champions community that have really helped us get a better understanding of, once we leave the projects, how you guys then see these adoption projects maturing over time. I think it's really important at the end of our 6 steps there to just reiterate what those 6 steps are, so it's very clear for people to understand. So number one was define your vision, scope and usage. Have a framework in your organization agreed at the beginning as to what your scope is, what you're going to be doing, and define those business priorities. Number 2 was getting the senior leadership team involved and bringing along champions for things like art of the possible. It's important with anything like this that if you are looking to take your organization along on a journey, that change must start at the top of the organization. It's no good the users inside the organization trying to do something, but the managers still trying to communicate in a completely different, separate way. We need that buy-in from at least a few people in your board, typically those people like marketing, operations, HR, sitting alongside IT. Point number 3 was work with the departments, understand where the changes and the technologies available inside Microsoft 365 are really going to help the users on a day-to-day basis in their department be more productive, collaborate better, improve communication, and look for the small wins that are really going to help them. Point number 4 is it's all about training. We've got to understand how we can connect with the users in a multitude of different ways. In this day and age, putting someone on a 2-day training course to use Microsoft Teams isn't going to be very attractive, isn't going to be very relevant. We've got to understand how we can make training attractive, relevant to all people that have different learning styles, and allow people to dip in and out when it is important to them. Point number 5 then was review, reflect, and resolve. As you start your project, you're probably going to come up with a vision for how this is going to work step by step by step. but we're dealing with people here. We're dealing with change. The road is never smooth. And what we need to do is make sure that we're constantly seeking the feedback, reviewing, altering course where we need to do, trying something different, because what has worked in one company or one department might not work in all. So it's constantly just looking for the ways that you're able to review, reflect, and resolve. And then finally, IT, technology is still important. Consider security, compliance, data protection, and how other projects such as the files, the phone system, and even device management may interact with this main project. Thank you ever so much to my co-hosts and the Champions community for joining me today on the Adopt 365 podcast. I have a really good time talking about these subjects. Our next podcast will all be about employee enablement and looking at Microsoft Viva with our special guest, Matuza from Poly.